is a virtual standstill in the Indian banking industry with a spate of big-ticket scams and fraud cases threatening to rock the very foundation of the state-run banks. The top managements have started playing extra safe, bringing a freeze on credit disbursals in turn. But industry sources say when it comes to project loans, bankers are not willing to take any risk whatsoever for the fear of a witch hunt in the case if the loan were to turn bad. They point out that some of the recent decisions by the RBI and Finance Ministry may have only made things worse, creating an atmosphere of fear among bankers who are now facing the heat from investigative agencies like the CBI, the Enforcement Directorate and the Serious Fraud Investigation Office, even over genuine business decisions that may have faltered.
Some of the top bankers who spoke to ET now say the directive to report NPAs of over 50 crore rupees to the Vigilance Commission and the move to hold back passports of big defaulters have created a situation of panic, while the decision to move more state-run banks under the RBI's framework for prompt and corrective action or PCA has only made matters worse. Coming at a time when the economy is showing signs of a recovery, there is a fear that the deadlock in the banking system could pose fresh hurdles to growth. Doubts are also being raised over the effectiveness of such moves. ET now welcomes a crackdown on willful defaulters, small and big, but the broader question is, will these measures help improve the NPA situation? More importantly, foster a healthy credit culture. The deadlock in the banking system and what it means for the economy at large, that is the topic of discussion tonight on the India Development Debate. The hashtag is Bandh. Joining us on the show, Narendra Taneja of the BJP, Gaurav Vallabh of the Congress, Shantanu Sen, former Joint Director, CBI, and the two experts, Swaminathan Iyer and Maithili Busturmat. Thank you all so much for joining us on the show. Maithili, I'm going to have to start with you because, you know, the NDA and the UPA are busy sort of playing blame game and trying to unearth a new NPA scam every day from their regime. So let's keep the politics aside, and no one seems to really care about the collateral damage that this entire episode is causing. You, on this very show, probably a fortnight ago, said it's time we bring down the decibel levels, it's time we tone down the noise because this could lead to a pretty precarious situation for the banking sector. Are your fears coming true?
Oh, absolutely. And clearly whatever I said fell on deaf ears all around, which is why we're seeing what we are seeing. And this was inevitable. In fact, the slowdown at credit offtake had started about 2 years ago, ever since we had the AQR, where the Reserve Bank came up with very different numbers from what the bank had, and then told them to make provisions. Very unrealistic timeframes were given. So I think there was a kind of a freeze on bank lending for quite some time. And unfortunately, just when the economy was kind of recovering and bankers were getting over those fears, now once again, thanks to the scam and the excessive reaction that we're seeing, the high decibel debate and the kind of controversies we are seeing to what it was essentially a fraud. Mind you, this is a fraud as distinct from an NPA. Of course, ultimately it will result in an NPA maybe, but a fraud must be seen as different from an NPA. But as a result of which the kind of crackdown that we've seen both from the Reserve Bank of India and from the Finance Ministry, a very textbookish, completely unrealistic kind of crackdown that we have seen, as a result of which bankers, particularly public sector bankers, because mind you, private sector bankers don't lend to risky loans. They stick to safe retail loans, housing, and relatively smaller loans where your money is not going to be at risk. But ultimately, banking is the business of risk. Somebody has to lend to infrastructure projects, somebody has to lend to more risky projects. And if the banks don't, who will? I think that question remains unanswered. And in our bid to crack down on the fraud, what we've done is really shot ourselves in the foot, because no public sector banker is going to risk his neck and lend when tomorrow that loan could go bad, entirely for reasons that are extraneous, entirely for business decisions which go wrong, and not because of any malified intent. So I think in the process we've overreacted, and now we're getting what we deserve.
Okay, we may have overreacted. The government in its own defense says that they were pushed to a corner in Indian industry and the crony capitalists were taking them for a ride, and which is why they had to overreact. But yeah, you have a point there. The lines between failure and fraud have completely diminished, and which is perhaps why we are looking at the collateral damage that we are. But Swami, how do you read the series of steps that the government is looking to take to crack down on the NPA menace, as a part of this crackdown really? Do you believe the government is in some sort of a panic mode? 50 crore worth of NPAs to go for forensic audits, passport details to be shared of people who have exposure of over 50 crore worth of NPA. Is this a chain of panic reactions that we are seeing?
Frankly, this reminds me of the last 2 years of the UPA after the 2G scam. I mean, because there was this panic about corruption, because that some action was taken against officials, all the officials began to say paralysis, don't take any decision of any kind. Hence, the last 2 years of the UPA government became slow growth years, paralysis of action, paralysis of policy years, which ultimately shot the Congress in its own foot. I think that is the danger we face today. Now, at that particular point of time, it was the NDA taking pot shots at the Congress and UPA, saying you're just a corrupt bunch of so-and-sos, and the Congress trying to react in its own way, in ways which ultimately led to paralysis. Are we now going to have a situation where, because of these Congress accusations against the BJP, if it overreacts as in the past, will this lead to policy paralysis, decision paralysis, slowing, and adverse political results? The risk is there. I do not think the worry that Mr. Modi and company have is nearly as much as at that particular point of time. Right. In the Nirav Modi case, you can argue the Congress gave as much leeway to Mr. Nirav Modi as UPA has done. They have brought up the Karti Chidambaram case. I'm sure there will be many more cases now brought up, many more arrests of some guys relating to the UPA era. If you could do it in the Karti Chidambaram, you can surely do it in other cases. So without doubt, the blame game, the politics is there. Will there be collateral damage? Yes, there will. Will it be as bad as in the UPA too? No. So far, I would say not quite so bad.
Okay, Swami there with his opening take. Let's take it to Shantanu Sen and the role of investigative agencies as well. And they are under pressure as well. When a high-profile fraud like this is committed, they need to be seen as acting as well. But, Mr. Sen, this business of issuing summons to 31 bank CEOs and asking them all to appear, what is this all about? I mean, my understanding is they're doing this to get more information on what really happened, what is the process. Some of these bank CEOs tell us that, they are being asked questions like, what is an LOU? How do you issue an LOU? So it's more like information gathering that's really happening, but it's being made out to be as if 31 bank CEOs are hand in glove with this mega fraud, as if they've had a role to play. And it's almost deja vu. The same thing happened with the 2G case as well, because this is what vitiates the overall business climate in the country.
You see, the 3 C's, the CBI, the CAG and the CVC, have always been pointed out as blocks to proper bank functioning. That was said by the former finance minister, Mr. Jaswant Singh. I agree that nobody likes to be investigated. And I'm with you there. Harassment of investigation does affect the proper working of an individual. But why blame the CBI or the CVC or the CAG when they are doing their tasks? After all, they have to ask questions. And if they ask questions which appear foolish, I assure you that when you people ask questions about law and come to conclusions about judgment and orders and about evidence, you too look not very intelligent. So CBI people ask basic questions which may sound basic to you, but may not be basic to them. That is their job, to ask questions. Now the question which you are facing is, after this humongous fraud and a series of NPAs, the CBI, the CVC and the CAG have been tasked to find out how this can be looked into. They are doing their job. And I can assure people who have not made money out of these deals, except serious physical discomfort, they can be assured of non-prosecution. If they have made money, they'll have to face it. But you will agree that they have a task to perform and they are doing their task to the best of their ability. And you must bear with them, because after all, there has been humongous loss, great loss, and there has been fraud, there has been NPA, there has been corruption, and there has been mismanagement too. There has been accusation that people who take small loans have been harassed, and people who are given big loans are looked after, they are overlooked. So all these allegations made against the banking officials cannot be just looked away.
No, I don't think one can
There
wish,
is going
right.
to be some harassment.
Yeah. I think
And
in
you
an
must
ideal
face
world
it.
we would
I'm
want
afraid
no
there is no
harassment. But
choice.
Mr. Sen, I get your opening remarks. I get the point of your opening remarks. I also did not miss the backhanded compliment of us questioning law and the judiciary and the legal process there. But Narendra Taneja, I think the question that we want to put forward on the table and discuss today is not just collateral damage, but what's happening on account of this. Is too much being done to solve this problem, and tarnishing of reputation seems to be one more thing. I mean, you have some of India's ace bankers, and we can't paint the entire banking industry as being corrupt and inefficient, and so I'm saying, you have the country's ace bankers being called by the CBI or ED. Now, a lot of people believe being called by the CBI or ED in itself is your hand in glove with the corrupt, which is obviously not true. But, all of this does lead to tarnishing of reputation.
Yeah, on the contrary, in fact, the government is trying its level best to improve the overall climate and to convey the message both for domestic investors and audience and as well as international audience that look all that the government is doing. We are against frauds, we're fighting against fraud, we are against black money, we are against such thing. But at the same time, we want to make sure that those who are the genuine people, that is easy to do business, is easy to borrow money, and at the same time, we are able to expand the banking sector, make it more modern, more transparent. If ED as a part of a process asks some question, these are regular things. You ask people who have been CMDs and public sector undertaking, these things, the questions are there. It does not mean if you are asked a question that, that means that the government is going after you or your idea is to tarnish your image. I mean, when we get a summon or when we get a letter of scrutiny from income tax, does not mean that, we are not paying taxes or we have done something wrong. In 99% cases, is nothing, it's just the routine thing. That's all. As I said, there are a lot of interaction between the government officials and the bankers and all that. Overall, we are studying and seeing that how can we actually improve overall banking sector further, how can we make it more transparent, and at the same time, how can we make sure that things like Nirav Modi's don't happen again. We are also studying at the same time, for instance, where the inspirations came from. For instance, some people are saying it started from Russia, when from Russia it went to these, letter of undertakings and so on and so forth. That is originally started from Russia. So those kind of things are being studied. So the whole exercise is actually to make bank healthier, more transparent.
Saying this entire pain is to Narendra
Taneja,
let me interrupt you there. You're saying this entire exercise is to make banks healthier. This entire exercise is to make banks healthier. Gaurav Vallabh, what is the Congress's grouse today? I mean, you've been complaining that the government isn't doing anything about it. Here is it, they've taken a series of steps. People are complaining that the banking system is going to be choked on account of some of these steps. So what is your grouse? These are steps that you should have been taken when, you could have taken when the UPA was in power, which didn't happen. And here is the government taking the steps. We're actually debating, are they overcompensating? So what is the grouse of the Congress party now on the back of the actions taken by the government post the Nirav Gate scam?
See, this government is very famous for taking haphazard policy decisions, and this is one of the example. This is something like a patchwork solution to the problem, and I will give you 3 reasons for that. On your show, we had done a full show on collateral damages. On that day, I was telling the biggest collateral damage will be the reputation, and the majority of foreign banks are not taking the LCs, they are not honoring the LCs issued by the Indian banks. So this is the first thing. Second issue, the credit and the gross fixed capital formulation, which are lowest, and with this, what are the major NPAs in the sector? There are 3 sectors: infrastructure, manufacturing, and the third one we call as a construction. When we will do all these things, the biggest job provider sectors will, all jobs which are there, whatever it is, it's job formulation itself is a big challenge. So whatever jobs remaining are there, we will lose that also. And mind it, in the last 4 years, the private investments were not picking up. Government is trying to make the public investments. So now that scope is also gone because the oil prices had started rising. And the second point is the fiscal deficit targets, which are now becoming more and more unachievable. So that's what I'm saying. I will call that as a solution which just provides no remedy, and it's a hurriedly taken decision without any proper planning, like what they did with GST.
All right, I get your point there. Your opening comments are these are hurriedly taken decisions without adequate and proper planning. But I'll take this across to Mr. Sen, and Mr. Sen,
and I gave 3
No, 1 second. Gaurav Vallabh, you've made your point. Please be patient. I will come back to you. Mr. Sen, I'll come to you on this. You know, the way NPAs are now being talked about in India, especially after the IBC, and now what we are seeing, the government taking action is, there is absolutely no discrimination between failure of a business and a fraud that was perpetrated. So an NPA on account of anything is an NPA irrespective of how it became an NPA. And because of that, all bank officials are now being painted in one stroke with one brush. They are guilty until proven guilty. And obviously, I'm playing along that. Surely that can't be an approach to resolving this crisis, can it?
No, I agree with you. Fraud is a fraud and NPA is NPA. They should not be mixed up. And no CBI officer or ED should play that game. And they should be immediately and harshly dealt with if they do so. Fraud means cheating and pecuniary advantage given where it was not due, and somebody making money who should not have made money. NPA is a question of judgment, and everybody can make a poor judgment. If such cases come to light, I suggest the ombudsman or somebody in the banking should take it to the CVC immediately. CBI and the ED have a superior authority called the Central Vigilance Commission. It should be brought to their notice. Why should you be shy of taking it? In fact, I used to find that bank people were not willing to take and defend the people who were right. They thought, let him face the law. And you know, this facing the law is a very harassing procedure. So the defense of the superiors, the vigilance and the CVs and the banking authorities should come to the assistance of the person who has made a wrong judgment. But the person who has committed fraud should be held squarely responsible, and the CBI should be aided in booking him.
Okay.
Here the fault lies with the superior authorities in the bank who do not defend those who make wrong judgment. Right. And haul them up before the CBI. If CBI is given a complaint, right, only then CBI gets into the act.
Right.
And the complaint is given by the bank. Why should the bank give a complaint when there is no corruption?
Okay, fair enough. That's a fair point. But you know, Swami, the fact is that now we're being told increasingly that there have been cases where mid-level officials of banks are actually going to the top management and saying, you know, any NPA case is saying, let's refer it to the CBI. You know, the tendency is let's play it safe. So there is this clamor from and I've spoken to a couple of top bank, CEOs, and they're saying that, especially in PSU banks, that a lot of the mid-level employees who are taking credit decisions, they want to get the monkey off their back. They're saying, like, you know, we don't want to be pulled up after retirement for some decision that we took and all. Let's refer it to CBI. Let's refer it to CBI. Is that, what kind of collateral damage could that approach, do?
I think we have to wait and see whether things become as bad as they were under UPA 2. Under UPA 2, something similar happened. Nobody at any level wanted to take any decisions. Are you going to get the same thing out here? Now, remember at that time, what was stressed was that there was a civil service rule. The civil service rule said that even if a civil servant has not personally benefited from a transaction which results in large private profit, if he is part of that decision, he can be held culpable, even if he has not made any money on his own. Now, I remember there was talk of scrapping that rule. To the best of my knowledge, that rule is still there, which means that, even if a bank officer is not actually culpable, he has not taken any money, but if there is a decision which as a result of which somebody makes a lot of money, that officer can be held culpable. If that rule is still there, I'm not sure, there was talk about removing it, but if that rule is still there, that rule definitely needs to be amended. We need people to have the feeling of security that, you know, I will not be held culpable unless there is proof that I actually took money or I received consideration for this act. If I took the act in good faith as a matter of judgment, which turned out to be false, there should be no case against me. I should not be held guilty merely because somebody else benefited.
Right.
No, I agree with you. You can't be held guilty just because somebody else benefited, despite the fact that I may have done my job well. But, you know, Maithili, the point that Gaurav Vallabh made initially was that credit offtake that was just about beginning to pick up, and, you know, the RBI in its commentary said the last policy that we are seeing early recovery of credit offtake. Will all of this suffer on account of that? I mean, you rightly said banking or, you know, borrowing and lending is also an act of faith. You take risk, there's a certain leap of faith you take and you go ahead and lend to an entity. Will credit offtake be dented on account of this? And, you know, given that perspective, have we shot ourselves in the foot?
Oh, well, yes, definitely, I would think so. And not only because bankers are now worried or scared of what will happen to them, you know, which of the 3 C's will land at their door, but also because banks are spending all their time, you know, doing basic compliance. Every account over 50 crores, which is likely to become NPA, you need to examine whether there is fraud. You now need to get passport details. So banking has now been reduced to becoming like a government department. It's like a departmental undertaking, not a commercial business anymore. And I could just respond to what Mr. Sen had said. He said, you know, that there's, these 3 investigative agencies are only doing their jobs to the best of their ability. The question is, what is their ability? They're all staffed with bureaucrats and policemen who do not understand, who have never taken a commercial decision in their entire life. So they look at every decision as suspect. Also, he also said that there might be some harassment. Question is not some harassment. Almost anybody who is called by any of these investigative agencies invariably is asked for judicial custody. Now, judicial custody is not a very easy thing to handle, and in India the principle is not as in law. In law, the basic principle is bail, not jail. In India, it's exactly the opposite. It is jail, not bail. So, unless you know that somebody is going to tamper with the evidence, where is the need to have him either in judicial custody or to arrest him? Whereas on the slightest suspicion in India, the first thing we do is claim judicial custody, and God knows what happens in judicial custody. It's not a very, very pleasant job at all, not very nice to be in judicial custody by any standards. So I think it's important that A, the Serious Fraud Office is staffed with people who understand banking, who understand what commercial decisions are, who have perhaps have some experience of lending. Unfortunately, neither the investigative agencies, nor the Reserve Bank of India, nor the Finance Ministry, there is not one person who has done a day's lending. And today, sitting with theoretical knowledge, it's not sufficient. I think you need to know, only the wearer knows where the shoe pinches. Unfortunately, today all the investigating agencies, Finance Ministry and the regulator have very little idea because they've never worn the shoes of a banker. Unfortunately, that is the situation. Unlike investigating agencies abroad who have people who have lateral entry and who understand the business, and that makes a world of difference.
Maithili, that's a strong comment there on the state of banking. You're saying only the wearer know where the shoe pinches. You're saying that investigative agencies aren't competent really to look at some of these cases. I have to get a quick rebuttal from Shantanu Sen before I take it back to the politicians. Shantanu Sen.
Well, have you all forgotten the Harshad Mehta scandal? I'm sure you haven't. And there the investigation was done by the CBI. CBI gave advice to the joint JPC, and that was a very good investigation. Harshad Mehta was nailed. The RBI governor was nailed. The chairman of the State Bank of, managing director of the State Bank of India was nailed. Margabandhu was nailed. And they had acted all illegally to make available the funds of the PSU to Harshad Mehta. How can you say that the CBI people do not know their job? You talk about everybody being summoned, put into jail. That's absurd, ridiculous. Which so many people have been called for interrogation. After all, you should know the law. There is a section called 161 of the CRPC where people are asked to come and give evidence. That is not sending the person to judicial custody. A banker, unfortunately, does not know the law, and he thinks anybody summoned is being summoned to be harassed or to be prosecuted. No,
I think
only those who are nailed, who have been found to commit illegal acts, who have given money. You name one person, now name one person who has not committed an offence and has been sent to jail.
Right.
I'm sorry.
No,
you have to know the procedure of police investigation.
No, Mr. Sen, I think
SFIO has, CBI has advisors from the bank.
Right. Mr. Sen, I will have to come in there.
We had a series of banking officials as our advisors.
Fair point. Mr. Sen, I will have to come in there. I think the larger point that Maithili was trying to make, and I don't think she needs a defendant, and definitely not on this show. She understands banking more than any of us do. But I think the larger point that Maithili was trying to make is that banking or lending or borrowing today is an extremely complex thing, and it's not as easy to understand. And given the narrative in the country and given the institutional activism that one has seen in the last 7-8 odd years, one fears that could the investigative agencies perhaps be stepping on someone else's toes. I think that's the larger point. But yeah, you've given a spirited defense that they have advisors, they know their jobs.
Agree.
I take your point, sir. I take your point, sir.
CBI has banking advisors.
Sure, I take your point and we appreciate that as well. But I'm going to take it across to Naren Taneja. And Mr. Taneja, it's a bit of an uncomfortable question here, because given the crackdown that we are seeing and given the kind of the size of accounts that we are now talking about, the number of measures that are now being taken, it's almost like everything in India is being scrutinized. And many people are tempted to ask, is the crackdown all about optics? Is the government keen to be seen as acting? Because none of what is going to be cracked down upon now, or none of what happens now will undo the damage that has already been done.
Where is the crackdown? We don't see it. There is no
crackdown,
and there is no panic. You know, one of my co-panelists here was, no crackdown. Where is the crackdown? If you ask some questions, you want to, get more familiar, you want basically discuss, have some conversation, is that crackdown? You see, and the panic, somebody was saying panic. Where is panic? I mean, and I'm really surprised. I have very high regards for Maithili. She knows banking, I don't. I'm not a banker. But I'm really surprised. Is she talking about India? Probably she's talking some other country in Africa. I don't think that's, the picture that she painted has anything to do with India of 2018. No, absolutely no. And this almost very close to, it borders to spreading fear psychosis. I mean, this will damage country's reputation. It has nothing to do with reality.
Naren Taneja,
let the government, you say fraud is a fraud. If there is a fraud, the agencies will go after the fraudster.
I don't think you've done in a while, Mr. Taneja.
You don't let me speak. You have to give me equal time that you give to others. You don't let me complete.
Okay,
please give me the same amount of time.
Please go ahead. I have a follow-up question for you as well, but please go ahead. Complete your point.
Yeah, but let me answer this first.
Sure.
Please. You see, the point here is that please don't do that, because there is no reality and there is no crackdown. These are the normal thing. I mean, if somebody has committed fraud and there are something, the government had to take action, is public money. That's the government job. Government is just doing its job. And having conversation with the bankers, with the CEOs and all that doesn't mean there is a crackdown. There is no such thing. But at the same time, you see the Congress spokesperson is saying what he's saying. I understand, because for him it's politics. He's suggesting the banking sector has come to a complete standstill. There is no business, there is no credit and all that. Fine.
I'm giving data, Mr. Taneja. I'm not saying anything
reality
like
is
that.
Only what Karthi Chidambaram and P. Chidambaram. So, but that's the political thing he is doing. That's fine.
Okay.
But the question is that all I'm saying is, please, no panic, and there is no crackdown. Is business as usual,
and we are only making the banking sector better, healthier and more transparent.
Okay, I understand that, and you know, Mr. Taneja, the intent of this debate is to do anything but spread panic. In fact, we're actually saying that there has been excessive, noise around this entire issue, and that is what is choking. There is no banker who is willing to come on this show, sir, and talk about the damage that's been caused as a result of these actions. I can tell you that we've tried reaching out every banker. You're talking about where is the crackdown. I'll tell you what the crackdown is. Today, any NPA over 50 crores needs to be referred to for a forensic audit. Any NPA over 50 crores, the bank has to get the passport details of the person to ensure that look at the compliance burden that is going to put on everyone who's taking the loan. And we talk of ease of doing business. 31 bank executives are being summoned by the SFIO. 31 bank executives are being summoned by the SFIO. Look at the reaction that's happened in banking stocks and trade today. Look at the amount of wealth that has been eroded in two banks whose top executives were questioned just yesterday. This is what I'm talking about, a crackdown. Swami, is this is this normal? Is this business as usual, or is this a crackdown that needs to be talked about? Swami.
Without question, there is action being taken. The word crackdown, you may say, is this too strong a word or not? But the notion that this is business as usual, I mean, that's a joke. It is most certainly not business as usual. It is most certainly a government very worried about its anti-corruption credentials, a government very worried that what happened to the Manmohan Singh government, for heaven's sake, it should not happen to this government. We must not once again get stuck with the label of being pro-corruption. Let us go into it as hard as possible. Does it have the potential for large-scale collateral damage? Yes. I don't know what will actually happen. Let us see how far this goes. Let us see if there is a combination of giving comfort to the bank employees, giving comfort to the bank CEOs. Look, this is not a crackdown. We are just going to be a little more careful. We have to manage the optics. We understand that there is risk. Maybe there will be this kind of internal conversation, and maybe after some time, hopefully, we will in fact return to business as usual. But at this particular point, with the kind of rules that you have laid down, you cannot possibly have business as usual. In fact, so many bank officials will be spending all their time on, am I complying with this? Have I double checked with this? Frankly, I personally, in the last few days, every time I issue a large check, the bank phones me. Have you really issued a check of this much? Me. I mean, on the issue of a check. It's not even a question of anything else. They want to make sure that nobody has fraudulently signed my signature. I mean, if that banker should be doing something more important than this. If banking time is being taken up by this particular scare, it is unquestionably at the cost of the economy.
All right. I think you're so right. I think, it's not just about a check, or it's not just about an amount that's debited. You do get those calls. Banking perhaps has moved away from being a business of trust to being a business actually where distrust seems to prevail a lot more. But I think on that note, we'll take a really quick breather. We come back and discuss more issues with the Congress party, and we ask some uncomfortable questions of the politicians right here. So stay with us. We are back in a moment right here on the India Development Debate. To be back with you once again on the India Development Debate, and I'm going to take this across to Mr. Gaurav Vallabh of the Congress Party. And Mr. Vallabh, a lot of people believe that this is a very, very bitter pill that is being administered on the economy. Some very harsh measures are being taken. I know Narendra Taneja is in disagreement. He doesn't believe that there is a crackdown, but yes, there are plenty of actions that are being taken that can be called a crackdown very, very easily. My question to you is, will the Congress party object to this bitter pill? If the rot wasn't so deep, and perhaps, the BJP is justified in blaming it, it's starting with the Congress party. It is not justified in not doing anything in the first 4 years of its own rule. But the reality is that the rot was so deep that a bitter pill has to be administered now. Are you going to defy that?
See, I don't know what bitter pill, because I will give you the reason for that. Earlier, my friends from BJP, they used to say that all all exposures were of UPA. Now there are NPAs which were sanctioned under the current regime and they become NPA. Second thing, they used to say we used to restructure the loan. I can give you 3 proposals which are with me, which are more than 800 crore exposures and which were restructured in the last September and August before this S4R scheme is taken back by the government. So they are just trying to divert and distract, and I am surprised, Supriya. My friend Mr. Taneja, I think he is a very knowledgeable person, but he is saying there is no crackdown. Are 50,000 crore plus direct loss and more than 1 lakh crore rupees of collateral damage had happened, and he is saying it is a routine exercise. I don't know what kind of environment and what kind of thought process is there in his mind about when he was saying this. See, jobs are going to be a serious challenge because of this. The infrastructure development is going to be serious challenge because of this. And I gave you a very good example that our LCs are not honored by the foreign banks. What big thing, what else we can accept, what can be the bigger collateral damage than this? I am surprised. This is the first time happened in the independent India that LCs or LOUs issued by the Indian banks, they were not sanctioned, they were not honored by the foreign banks.
Fair enough, Maitri. Let's play the devil's advocate here. You know, given the state of given the state of governance in PSU banks, given the fact that we had a crisis that just refuses to sort of die down in some sense, the NPA crisis, would you agree that this is in some ways a cleanup that was in order? It was important to fix accountability for the rot in Indian state-owned banks, and so some of these steps, extreme as it may be, are required to quote-unquote cleanse the system. And if you see it in the context of a series of steps that have been taken, whether it is the amendments to the bankruptcy code, whether it is the framework that has been put forward by the RBI and NPA recognition, whether these steps as well, if you see it in the context of all of this, the fraudulent economic offences, fugitive economic offenders bill, all these steps indicate the direction in which the government is thinking, that it wants to cleanse the system. Do you buy that argument?
Oh, well, absolutely. There certainly is a dire necessity to cleanse the system. Also, let us accept that there is much that is rotten, both with public sector banks as also with private sector banks. But I think there is also a need to be a little pragmatic about it. Take the decision today to give telecom operators a little bit more time to pay their spectrum charges. Now, that is a sensible, pragmatic decision. Likewise, had this been done in the case of steel, in the case of power, in the case of other infrastructure projects, we would not have been in this kind of predicament. Unfortunately, the Reserve Bank of India in particular showed absolutely no sensibility whatsoever to the problems in the infrastructure sector and why so many loans to the sectors had become NPAs. Instead, they cracked down, took down a very theoretical textbook approach. As a result, today we are in the mess that we are. Take for instance the RBI's latest circular, which says the moment you restructure an account, it has to be provided for, must be treated as an NPA. Now, restructuring is part and parcel for every large account. If you're setting up an oil refinery, if you're setting up a power project, and suddenly the Indonesian authorities raise duties on export of coal, and coal suddenly becomes very expensive, or suddenly a coal block auction is cancelled, it will be necessary for you to rework the project. Now, each and every restructuring does not warrant provisioning, does not warrant being treated as an NPA. So, I think the problem really is that even in the Reserve Bank of India, there is lack of knowledge of practical banking. We do not have lateral entry like we have in many other regulatory authorities abroad, and this lack of awareness, this lack of the sensibilities. Take for instance Viral Acharya's statement when banks asked him that can they make the mark-to-market provisions, can it be staggered when the bond market went through so much volatility? Instead of saying that he would consider it, Dr. Acharya said, no, we are not in the business of protecting banks. You have to make the mark-to-market adjustments right now, here and then. So, these kind of lack of understanding of the practicalities of banking, I think in the process, we really have shot ourselves in the foot. As I said, the telecom change that we've seen in the telecom sector is exactly the kind of pragmatism. Had this been done in the other sectors, we would not be in the predicament that we are, at least as far as NPAs, which I repeat are quite different from frauds and must be handled differently and pragmatically.
Swami, I want to come to you on this, that the point that Maithili is making, that the cleanup is in order because the rot is so deep, and she's right, it's not just the public sector bank, but even in the private sector entities. Do you believe that it is so messy out there that this sort of a cleanup is required, this sort of a bitter pill?
I'm afraid there is no sector with clean hands, including the banks. In an ideal world, I would entirely agree with Maithili that, there should be promoters. If they run into difficulties, the honest promoters should be dealing with honest banks and honestly restructuring. The fact of the matter is, in India, the bank's chairman, the bank's people themselves are appointed sometimes on dubious grounds by dubious politicians. Then you have the industrialists who are sometimes dubious characters, again with dubious links, who've got dubious loans. In these circumstances, if there is a public outcry, if you say, no, this is genuine, the credibility of both the politician and the bank by now is tattered. Because they don't have credibility, the RBI is saying, in a situation where these guys don't have credibility, let us have a straightforward rule of thumb. Now, this kind of straightforward rule of thumb is never ideal. It is something which undoubtedly will result in some stupidities, in some injustices. But the aim of having that kind of watertight rule of thumb is, they saying, if you do this, at least you will catch the bad cases, even if you do some damage to the good cases. It is a tough call, but to only blame the RBI is, I think, the wrong thing. The whole system is rotten. And this rot, I'm afraid, especially applies to the public sector banks, where the nexus between the politician, the bank chairman and the businessman has for a very long time drawn a lot of adverse comment.
Swami, they're disagreeing with Maithili on 2 points. One, he's saying that it's unfair to blame the RBI largely, and also he says that the rot is far more in the PSU banks. So Maithili, I think, believes that PSU banks are bashed up for no reason in some cases. But let me take it to you, Shantanu Sen, and I understand the difficulty with which an investigating agency operates in a climate like this, when there is intense political pressure, there's so much of noise around a sensational fraud like this. But really help us understand what is it that an investigating agency, is it possible at all to sort of get to the bottom of a scam like this without causing collateral economic damage? I mean, in your experience over the years, if you look at all the sensational cases that have had so much of media spotlight, so much of political attention, so much of scrutiny, public scrutiny, is it possible to get to the bottom of these cases without causing acute collateral economic damage?
I think this is a very good question. I would suggest that the complaints sent to the CBI should be carefully assessed. No complaint regarding an NPA should be sent to the CBI for investigation by the banking authorities. Normally, CBI doesn't take up its case on its own. There is no suo motu action in banking matters because CBI really doesn't have the information about frauds in the bank. So the bank vigilance sends the complaint to the CBI. Let's be very careful about sending the complaints. And after sending the complaint, I would always expect the bank to send some officers along with the investigations to aid and advise the CBI regarding inquiries to be made. Some honest, good officers, CBI always asks for assistance. When we take up an investigation from a complaint from the state police, we take state police officers to assist us. Similarly, in these matters, the banks should involve some of their good officers into the inquiry. In the Harshad Mehta case, I remember the State Bank of India did devote, RBI did give us officers, and that helped us to understand the nature of the fraud. You have to cooperate and collaborate with the CBI. And please spare the CBI from investigations of NPA cases, because these cases then lead to a lot of collateral damage which harm the reputation of both the CBI and the bank. And finally, when frauds take place, then the banking authorities should give full measure of cooperation to the CBI. And when there is no fraud and CBI is investigating the case, the banking authorities should go up to the CVC and halt the investigation. They have to play a role.
Right.
Sometimes they fear the CBI. They should not.
Yeah, I think that's the
senior officers should go to the Central Vigilance Commission, who under the SP Act is responsible for CBI, and tell them this investigation is not on. CBI can halt the investigation. CBI can go to the court and seek seizure. You must know the law and use the law when an unfair investigation is going on.
No, absolutely. I think you've completely hit the nail on its head. When it's an unfair investigation, go to the investigative agencies and ask them to halt, investigation in there. It takes a lot of guts and it takes a lot of fearlessness to do that. I wonder if a lot of bureaucrats and public sector officials have that. But I will take a question to Naren Taneja. And Mr. Taneja, away from investigation and away from this bitter pill and all of that, if we are actually going to get down to the specifics of what has been ordered, 50 crore worth of NPA, 50 crore worth of loans. Who takes these loans? It isn't the big industrial houses. It isn't the big business houses. It is the MSMEs, the small businesses, the medium-sized enterprises. And all of those entities are big job guzzlers. They have been hit by demonetization first. They've grappled with the GST. And now this. These are the guys who will now be hit with even higher compliance. My question is, as a part of political signaling, are we doing away with a sector that is the backbone of the Indian economy? That is the big job guzzler. Are we doing away with the potential of job creation as well?
No. On the contrary, in fact, we are doing, when you look at our efforts, we are incentivizing MSE sector like never ever before. And when we say 50 crore, it's just basically a kind of number, because even in SMEs, there are some cases. And moreover, look, it does not mean that you're going to interrogate every banker or you're going to look into every single case. It's not like that. When you make a policy decision, you basically, fix a kind of, a level and then work upwards. So that's the whole idea. But the government has a sense, and the bank, of course, top management, they know precisely what they are supposed to do, and that is the whole idea. Idea is not to create this kind of, I don't know where this fear mongering is coming from and all that, or Congress spokesperson saying that foreign banks have now stopped honoring Indian papers, including LC and so on and so on. So this is all fear mongering. There is no truth in it. And out of thousands and thousands and lakhs of bank executives, out of these lakhs of bank executives, if 30 people have been questioned, does it mean that, it's a crackdown? Out of lakhs of them, 30? You see, the government has to do its job, and is in fact the whole exercise only to help banks. And those who are coming forward and all that kind of with information and all that, this does not mean the system will come to a standstill. Okay. It does not mean you will look into every single case. Okay. Precisely, banks know very well, bank management know very well which case to look into and which case they don't need to look into.
Fair enough.
They're professional, they know their job.
Okay, 30 seconds, Gaurav. I need to go to Swami for the closing comments. 30 seconds to you, Gaurav.
Why, Sandeep, 30 seconds? It's unfair on your part.
I started this
so let
it's
me
a 1 hour show, Gaurav. You're the only
point.
person I'm asking a second question to. I open this segment with you quickly.
Okay. Thank you. No, you asked everyone. Anyhow, see, I am saying that this is a distraction and disruptive strategy. Why I am saying distraction? Because government wants to distract the public that we are doing this. And disruptive because it's not going to get anything. The entire business cycle, credit cycle, employment, gross fixed capital formulation, all of them are going to have an adverse impact because of this.
Okay, fair enough.
This is a disruptive strategy.
Okay. I get that point. Distractive and disruptive.
Good lecture,
Swami,
Professor.
Okay, Swami, let you have the last word. In the end, it's a trade-off, isn't it, for Prime Minister Modi and for this government. On the one hand, some of these steps may have the adverse consequence of choking the banking sector, putting more strain in the banking sector, cutting the credit flow. But on the other hand, it sends a very strong political signal. I mean, now we have Congress party talking of job losses and, collateral damage, and not so much about the government action. So in the end, his political messaging is probably what he's getting at. So it's a trade-off, and clearly we know what the government is leaning towards.
Look, this is a tightrope walk. On the one hand, you have to do something to improve the banking system. On the other hand, whatever you do must not go overboard to the extent that you cause paralysis in the banking system, fear in the system, and that then have an adverse knock-on onto your production, onto your employment and everything else in the economy. So this is a tightrope walk which needs to be expertly done. I do understand that you cannot ignore what has happened. Something terrible has happened and you do need remedial steps. At the same time, you need to be careful that this does not lead to banking paralysis, to a paralysis of credit and to a knock-on effect on the economy.
Indeed. On that note, completely out of time on this edition of the India Development Debate. I can't thank my wonderful panel for this very fascinating discussion. Swaminathan Nair, Maithri Dasturmat, Mr. Shantanu Hussain, Mr. Narendra Taneja, Mr. Gaurav Vallabh. Thanks very, very much for being with us. And like we've really discussed and debated, the collateral damage on account of the NPA mess and the crackdown that has followed. Perhaps a nuanced approach is required, but maybe the mess is so deep that the nuanced approach will have to wait for a while. Will Indian economy, will jobs, and will the industry though pay a price for this crackdown?
Thanks for watching this edition of India Development Debate. Up next is Top 10 at 10 with Tanya. Keep it with ET now.